In this podcast episode, we're going to talk about how to properly screen your tenants, how to avoid the bad ones, and how to avoid a costly mistake with your tenants. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Sam Kwak here again, one of the Kwak Brothers, and welcome to episode 23 of the Kwak Brothers podcast. As you guys might notice, we have a different look right to the set, and this is the first time we're rolling out a podcast using a new studio set and also new lighting as well. It doesn't look terribly white. We try to do as much editing as far as making sure that our video quality looks good. So in this podcast episode, we're going to talk about tenant screening, how to properly select the right tenants, how to avoid a costly mistake of putting the wrong tenants into your unit. So before we do, we're going to go and talk about the book of the podcast, and that is going to be Think and Grow Rich. Right? A lot of you guys may have already read this, but guys, for those who have not, this is an absolute must if you want to start creating financial wealth, financial literacy, and also ultimately financial freedom. So Think and Grow Rich is a phenomenal book. I think you can get a copy for less than $10 in Amazon. This is a phenomenal book if you want to understand how to accumulate wealth and richness financially. This book will give you an idea how to do it. I know there's an updated version of this book, and a lot of times you can get the modern translation version, which is nice. So you can get the book, which is phenomenal. I highly recommend that you get this book. So moving along with the topic and a couple announcements here. We'll try to make every Tuesday night 6 p.m. Central Time as our podcast recording time. So what we'll do is if you guys subscribe to our newsletter at thekwakbrothers.com, you guys will get any upcoming newsletters and announcements, and also the link to hop on to our live recording. So you can actually join us in having a conversation about tenant podcast and real estate investing. For this episode, we're going to talk about, of course, tenant application and how to screen your tenants. So I'm going to speak a lot from my experience, and for those live audience joining us, they can hop on board later on, and I'll create a time for us to have a conversation. So in this episode of podcast, we're going to be talking about tenant application and tenant screening, some costly mistakes you can avoid. You know, I've made mistakes along the way as far as putting the wrong tenants into my building. You guys may have seen my other episode. The 3-unit prostitute story is a perfect example of what you should not do. For those who have not seen the podcast, I'll go ahead and attach that link at the end of this video. You'll see the podcast episode that I'm referring to. But in summary, right, I ended up putting who I thought was a friend into one of my properties as a tenant, and it did not go so well. Okay, it cost me over $10,000 to remove the so-called friend / tenant. There were some damages I had to remedy. Some compliance issues. So guys, all in all, the first point, I guess, is never put your own friend / family in as a tenant, right? It'll be the worst mistake you ever make. Even though they may pay well, they may be the richest people, right, you'll ever know. Let me tell you the first thing, by them knowing you, right, they're going to get a little relaxed, and they'll think that you owe them something. Okay, this isn't 100% of the case, but I'm talking to you guys coming from my own experience, right? Not everyone is going to be entitled or feel like they're owed something, but I'll tell you, vast majority of the time, that a lot of the family and friends, if you put them in as your tenant, I would tell you 8 times out of 10 they will not pay the rent. Okay, or as far as maintenance goes, they'll bug you about it all the time. So I recommend that you do not put any of your own friends, family as a tenant. I strongly recommend that you just go through advertising through either a property manager, right? We talked about this 2 weeks ago, two podcasts ago. We talked about pros and cons of a property manager. Either through a property manager, a leasing agent, or you do it yourself on Zillow, Redfin, Trulia, Hotpad. I mean, there's plenty of sites out there that can help you find prospective tenants and such forth. Now, let's talk about the actual screening itself. And we have to also talk about fair housing, because fair housing is definitely something that you don't want to mess around with, right? You don't want to violate fair housing because it's going to cost you money. Not only that, it's going to cause it may be a publicity issue, right? You may appear on the news or your town newspaper, and they're gonna accuse you of being quote unquote racist, right? I mean, that seems to be the hot word these days. They're going to accuse you of discrimination, which is something that you definitely do not want. It costs money even to defend it. And I know I hear stories all the time because I've never been in that situation. I hear stories all the time whereby someone got into a discrimination lawsuit, which I don't think this person had any intent to do so at all. This person was trying to be fair at every level possible when it comes to dealing with the prospective tenant. But just to defend a discrimination case is going to be, costly, right? You're going to have to pay a ton of legal fees. You have to pay the attorney a ton of just time, right? Retainers, you name it, right? So you never want to get into that position in the first place, even if you have a case to win. Okay, even if you have the case to win, you're gonna spend a lot of money defending your case. So you never really want to get in that situation. So the best way to handle or prevent a discrimination lawsuit or any sort of violation of fair housing laws is to get educated, right? Is to take classes, training, seminars about fair housing laws and what you can do and cannot do. Even in your own advertising, guys, if you put something out there on Craigslist or Zillow, you have to be extremely careful how you advertise, because that also may lead to a lawsuit if you advertise in certain ways that may deem to be discriminatory. So you definitely don't want to advertise falsely or incorrectly, even if you have zero intent, right? Even if you have zero intent to discriminate, okay? If you are not careful with the words that you choose in your advertising or when dealing with the prospective tenants, you can get into trouble. Okay, so that's the first thing that I would recommend, or I guess the second thing next to not putting your own family or friend as a tenant. So second thing is really understand what fair housing laws are like. This is a federal law, so if you get in trouble, this is any state. Don't want to discriminate. Okay, and it's not just race; it's also religion, disabilities, gender, right? Familial status. So get to know your fair housing laws. Super duper important, and it carries all the way through the application process. Okay. That being said, in your application, make sure you're screening for a couple of things here, right? You want to make sure that they're employee, they have a job, that they can pay, of course, to live at your property. So you want to make sure that they have income coming in, stable job. You want to see how long they've been around in that job for, right? You don't necessarily want to take in someone who's only had their job for 3 months. Okay, you want some stability, right? You kind of want to have that. You kind of want to have that attitude or a framework of being a bank, right? Like how a bank may underwrite you for a loan. You kind of want to have that same mentality as far as who you want to select as your tenant. So keep in mind, fair housing is pretty much the foundation of this. But you also have to look at their income, their credit, their background, right? You don't necessarily want someone who has a long history of criminal activity, right? Theft, drug use, violence, domestic abuse. You don't want any of that. So you want to make sure you screen for that. And there are services where the tenants can actually pay for them to get screened, both on the criminal / background check and also their credit. And I highly recommend that you check all 3 bureaus, all credit bureaus, right? TransUnion, Experian, Equifax. You check all 3 bureaus because sometimes a negative reporting can only show up on 1 credit bureaus and not the other 2, or it can show up on 2 credit bureaus and not the other one. So you really have to check thoroughly as far as if they have any sort of negative or delinquent accounts, right? Late payments, collection, bankruptcy, any sort of judgments. You want to look out for that. Obviously, if they filed a bankruptcy 7 years ago, which in most cases it should have been taken out of their credit report. But if you see something that's been around for it's long time ago, you may give them a little bit of pass. But if you use a professional screening service, and stick to their guidelines and the parameters, that avoids any sort of discrimination, because now you're treating everybody fairly. You're not selecting one over the other. You're not saying, oh well, this guy has 650 credit and the other has 550. I'm going to go with the 550 because they have this, right? You want to make sure that you're applying fair and consistent rules when screening your tenants. So if you have 10 different tenants or prospective tenants that applied, make sure you're using the same exact screening measures for all 10 tenants, right? If you use different screening measures for each of the tenants, well, now you're looking at a possible discrimination because you're treating everybody differently, right? Equal opportunity for everybody, right? We want to treat everybody the same when it comes to them applying for your rental, your housing. So your application has to be airtight, and I strongly recommend that you use either an attorney or you use a local property manager. And having a property manager in itself is going to take care of 99% of the problem, because it's up to them to screen the tenants, to fill in the tenants, or fill in the vacancy with the tenants, right? Vice versa. So if you have a property manager, usually this is taken care of. You don't necessarily have to worry about screening. But if you are managing your own property, this is something that you have to definitely get educated about. Is the application process, what to include on the application and what not to include on the application, right? So you don't want to obviously get caught on your application already asking a question that may be discriminatory. You don't want to do that. So in your application, you want to find out their employment history, their past landlord, if they have a history with that. You want to see their credit, right? Make sure that they have a decent credit, and don't judge by the credit score alone, although that is a pretty good measuring tool. But use the content, right? The meat and the potatoes of the credit report. See what's inside. My rule of thumb generally, and we have a pretty consistent rule of thumb, is that if they have any sort of late payments, collections, charge-offs, bad debt, whatever it may be, if there's any of that within 5 years, the last 5 years, we automatically deny them, right? We don't want to have someone who recently, have any sort of negative marks. So we want to stay away from anyone who's got negative marks in the last 5 years. We want to see that they've actually made some progress towards some improvement, right, in their credit. So we turn them down if they have that. But at the same time, we try to help our prospective tenants by sending them to credit repair, which, by the way, we use a company called creditnerds.com. I'll also include that in the link description below, so if you want to check that out. We use creditnerds.com to kind of send them to the tenants who are denied, tell them, hey, listen, go work with these guys. Maybe you'll have some credit. You'll improve your credit by working with these guys, perhaps. And try again, right? Come back to us in 3 months or 4 months, and we'll definitely reconsider your application. So that's something that we do, to get them, to at least help them out, right? Because we don't necessarily want to just turn them away and, not see any sort of assistance towards them. Another thing is that if you do turn people away, make sure you give them what's called an adverse action letter, basically telling them why they were denied. Sort of like how when you apply for a credit card and they deny you, you get a letter from the bank or the lending institution as to why you were denied. Make sure you send them a letter, or even I believe federally you can send them an electronic email, right? Notification letting them know why they were denied in the first place. Make sure you check with your state laws though, because I'm not an attorney, right? Make sure you check with your state laws as far as what to look for in terms of what to send them if you deny your tenants. So make sure you check on that when denying your tenants. You're sending them an adverse action letter. List out the reason why they were terminated or they were denied. Mostly has to do with credit and criminal. That's the measuring stick that you should be using to bring on a tenant. And absolutely no case, right? Absolutely no condition you should be using their race, gender, right, familial status, sexual orientation as a basis for turning them down, right? If you do that, it's trouble. There are some few exceptions, which I'm not going to go into too much of in detail, but generally you want to make sure you're not discriminating against those protective class when taking an application. So make sure you do your application fairly. If you choose to go with an online application, great. I will tell you a lot from experience. There will be certain tenants that may not be too friendly with online applications, especially the older tenants. But what I like about electronic tenants or electronic application is that if they know how to navigate through an electronic application, I know they're going to be able to pay their rent online because our company, right, my property management company, they tend to receive their rents online. So I like that. It's much of a smoother process. I would prefer that our tenants pay online. It's just easier that way. It's an easier process if we accept any sort of rent via online. Cool. So when you're going through the application process and you're managing the property yourself, you're going to have some prospects. Make sure you screen them properly. Guys, please don't go out there and just say, well, I'm going to use a gut feeling, or I'm just going to judge the character to see what they're like. Do yourself a favor, protect yourself from discrimination. Even if you're not racist or whatever, have a solid measuring stick and kind of defer, delegate the screening process to a third-party company. Right. So that's why a lot of these property management companies charge $50, $60 for applications. Use that money towards the screening, right? Because a lot of these screening services will charge you $40, $50. So use the application fee that you're going to ask of the tenant, the prospective tenants, as a way to pay for the screening service. And make sure you screen the screening service, because there's a lot of shady screening services that are either ineffective or they have false reports or false information. Obviously, you don't want to rely on those. You want to rely on accurate accounts of credit and criminal background to make sure you're just, as a decision, to make a decision on your prospective tenants. So, guys, that's pretty much it for the podcast. We're actually going to open it up for live audience. If you don't have any questions, great. That's totally fine. We have someone here that is watching us live here. But for those who want to join us for next week's live podcast, guys, subscribe to our YouTube channel, first of all, and jump onto the kwakbrothers.com. Sign up for our newsletter, and we'll send out every week exactly when we're going to do our podcast. It's going to be on Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Central Time, which is 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and 5 p.m. 5 p.m. Mountain Time. So hop on board. This is going to be live. Love to have a conversation with you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and see if anyone has any questions or thoughts, comments they want to share from our live audience here. Anybody? You guys can go ahead and comment, and I will go ahead and unmute you, and you guys will be able to talk and chat. So the comment box is open and available to you guys. All right. So if you don't have any thoughts, comments, questions, that's great. That's awesome. We'll go ahead and come back next week, Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Central Time. If you guys want to join us for live, of course, this will be on YouTube. And I want to thank you so much for tuning in again. And be sure to check out some of our podcasts. I'll go and leave the links for the resources, including the book for Think and Grow Rich. That will be in the link description box below. Also, another shameless plug is that my brother and I, Dano and I, the Kwak brother, right? I'm not the only brother, right? That'll be weird. My brother and I were looking for additional students. So if you guys want to learn how to invest in real estate, want to learn further on tactics such as owner financing, raising money, doing apartment deals like we are, we're going to go ahead and include a link at the end of the video. If you go to the kwakbrothers.com/learn, you'll get an opportunity, of course, to fill in your information, get more information about our training that's available to you guys. The link is also going to be in the link description below. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, check it out. Get some more information, and we'll send over some information for you. So, guys, that's pretty much it for this podcast episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 23. I'll see you guys in the next week's podcast. All right, take care. Well, hello there. You made it to the end of this video, which means you loved the video, you liked what you saw. If you want to see more awesome real estate investing videos and podcasts in the future, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to get more notification about our next videos.